In this episode of the Global Travel Channel podcast show, I chat with someone who enjoys bicycle riding, so much so that he decided to participate in an event that's over 4,000 kilometres long. Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. My name is Mark Philpott. On the show, we talk to people from across the world about all things related to travel, from amazing adventures to inspiring stories to the not so well known destinations. We cover it all. You can find all of our previous podcast episodes on our Global Travel Channel website by going to www.globaltravelchannel.com. The Global Travel Channel is a collaboration between travel writers, photographers, YouTubers, podcasters, and travel bloggers from across the world. We bring you information that we hope makes your next travel experience an awesome one, no matter where you decide to go to. You can also find the Global Travel Channel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So be sure to subscribe, like, and follow us so that you can keep updated on our new content postings as and when they happen. You can even now support us through Patreon. We have a Patreon page, and for as little as a price of a cup of coffee per month, you can help us continue to produce our podcast show. Any contributions are greatly appreciated. Now on to today's show. A lot of people like going on cycling adventures. In this episode, I'm going to talk to someone who likes riding his bicycle a rather long way. So without any further delay, it's welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show to Mr. Phil Shirley. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for inviting me.
Let us know, whereabouts are we talking to you in the world today?
I am in a small town just southeast of Manchester, England, called Macclesfield.
Macclesfield, fantastic. Got a famous football club they have. It must be raining, is it?
It is indeed raining, yes. So you may hear a few raindrops on the window. Apologies about that.
That's okay.
Typical Manchester weather.
And is this where you're based permanently?
Yeah, I've been back in the UK for just over a year now. Prior to that, I was 23 years in Hong Kong. And yeah, I've done a lot of travelling, and I've lived in various places over the years.
You'll be keeping a very close eye on happenings in Hong Kong at the moment, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a tough 10 to 12 weeks for Hong Kong, although I think there's been some good news recently, so hopefully things will be calming down. I'm due a visit next week, so I'm hoping things have calmed down.
Well, let's hope you can get into the airport, because that was one of the places that was disrupted, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So fingers crossed.
Okay, well, we're not here to talk too much about political things today, although I'm happy to give it a go if you want to. But is this your first? Well, I promise not to talk about Boris Johnson or anything to do with Brexit on the show. I promise that.
Right. Let's steer clear of that. Appreciate it.
Is this your first time on a podcast show?
It is. Yeah, I think I may have recorded a podcast in a work and professional capacity, but that would have been on a very boring subject and probably highly scripted. So this is certainly something new to me. I'm a little bit nervous, so go easy on me. Okay.
Well, what I usually do with first timers is I have a random question that I'm going to throw at you just to get you warmed up, so you can get used to things coming to you from left field. I'll give you an easy one. What's your favourite snack food when you're travelling?
Probably nuts. Any type of nuts would be good for me.
Now it seems across the whole episodes that I've done so far that nuts or chocolate are coming out on top as far as people's favourite snack food. You won't believe it, in my last episode I had an Aussie guy who actually loves curry pies and coffee as his travelling snack food.
That's a good one.
It is indeed. We'll go with nuts for you. That sounds like a pretty good answer. I said in the pre-show intro before I started speaking to you that I'm going to be speaking to somebody today who enjoys riding a bicycle. I think that's a little bit of an understatement though. So We're going to be talking about a subject called the Tour Divide. So for the sake of all the listeners who are listening to us, and we do go out to over 57 countries across the world right now, what is the Tour Divide? Tell us what it is, where it is, and what it's all about in a short version, because I've got a ton of questions I'm going to ask you after this.
Okay, so the Tour Divide is an annual mountain biking ride. It traverses the Rocky Mountains from Banff in Canada all the way down to the Mexican border at a very small town called Antelope Wells in New Mexico. It follows something called the Great Divide mountain bike route, which in turn is very closely related to what's known as the Continental Divide, which is kind of defined by, on one side of the Continental Divide in the US, the water flows to the Atlantic, and on the other side, the water flows to the Pacific. Mm-hmm. So as you can imagine, there is a lot of mountains and hills involved, a lot of mountain passes, a lot of valleys. The total climbing that you do on a bike by completing this route is about 200,000 feet. So to put that into context, it's about 7 times Mount Everest. And in total, it's about 2,700 miles long. So 4,400 kilometers, approximately.
Extraordinary. So who does this? Like, is this you say it's an annual event, so is there people registering every year to participate like they would in a marathon race or something?
Yeah, it's very low key. There's you have to send a letter of intent, and you are registered on a website. Everybody carries a tracking device. So for those that participate in the race, you'll be tracked on a map. You have a GPS device, so you'll be a blue dot on a map. But as I say, it's pretty low key. The participants are very varied. There are several hardcore kind of super talented endurance athletes, and then there are normal people such as myself that can ride a bike but are not particularly great and not particularly fast. So from all walks of life, many different nationalities. And I think the beauty of it is it's accessible to anyone really who can ride a bike. You don't have to be super fit.
I'll come back to that thing you actually said about yourself being normal in a minute, but we'll talk about, let's go back a few steps in terms of your history in bicycle riding. Have you always been a keen cyclist? Where did this all come from?
Yeah, so I got into cycling through being asked to participate in a triathlon back in, I think it was the year 2000. So I bought a bike, and that's one of the disciplines in triathlon. And then I got obsessed by that for a few years. And then due to an injury, I couldn't run very well. I've never been a particularly great runner. So I got more into cycling, joined a local cycling group. I was living in Hong Kong at the time. Big shout out to the Tai Hang Terriers, if anyone's listening. So we would go out, cycling 2 or 3 times a week, and I got more and more into that. Did longer and longer rides, did more and more hills and more varied rides, and it just progressed from there really.
I was going to say that Hong Kong's a fairly hilly place to ride a bicycle.
It is. There's virtually no flat bits, I'm afraid, unless you go out to the airport. So yes, you're right. It's hilly from the start of the ride right to the end, and we have some great hills to cycle on. Surprisingly good cycling in Hong Kong. You'd think of it as an urban sprawl, but as soon as you get out of the central areas, there are some quite spectacular bike rides.
I bet. And are we talking about road cycling here or mountain biking?
Yeah, so that's a good point. There's virtually no gravel or dirt tracks in Hong Kong of the type that you find on the Tour Divide. So all of our cycling in Hong Kong was on tarmac, which was one of the challenges we faced in preparing for this ride.
Now, when you say we, is this a group of you that used to go riding in Hong Kong, sitting at coffee shops along the way and talking about these extreme rides that you could possibly do one day, and eventually this one came out of the bag? Or how did you find out about the Tour Divide?
Yeah, sort of. It was a good friend of mine, a guy called Tim Kramer. He was, let's just say, he was approaching a big birthday. We won't say which one. And he was looking for some kind of adventure to celebrate his birthday. And he sent a note to a few of us saying, "You've got to watch this movie. It's called Ride the Divide." So a few of us got together one night, watched this movie at my apartment. And, you know, within 15 minutes of sitting down and starting this movie, we were hooked. It was just something we had to do. It had such an effect on us that we couldn't get it out of our minds. So four of us signed up to do it and to start the ride together.
Now, I'm interested to know how much preparation did you do to take on a cycling journey that has, one, so much elevation, but also over 4,000 kilometres of riding? What sort of preparation time did you give yourselves?
I would say we started training seriously about 6 months before the actual event, so stepping up from our normal 2 or 3 rides a week, and just gradually increasing distance, and towards the end of that period building in a few multi-day rides where we would camp out overnight, just to get used to that. Given the lack of any gravel roads or dirt roads in Hong Kong, the Tour Divide is a mountain bike event, and I had no experience on mountain bikes. I'd only ridden a road bike before. So a few weeks before the actual Tour Divide, we took a trip up to Mongolia and did a 3-day mountain bike ride up there, which proved to be very eventful. I think we could probably create a podcast about that on its own. But that proved to be really good preparation. We encountered all kinds of bad weather. We got used to camping. We got used to spending 3 days with each other non-stop, which was good practice.
Now, if I read correctly, the Tour Divide, you have to take all of your supplies with you along the way. There's no support vehicles or anything like that. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's a totally unsupported event. There are no kind of checkpoints. You are provided with the route for downloading onto a GPS device by computer. You're provided with a map, but effectively it's unsupported. And the rules are that you cannot seek external assistance. You can only use services that are available to everyone. And you can't rely on your fellow competitors either to help out. Who
came up with this? Who was the founding father or person of the Tour Divide?
I don't know the answer to that, Mark, but the Ride the Divide movie that I mentioned was a documentary about one of the very early races. Could have been the first one, I'm not sure. But it's been going for many years now, and I think it's kind of grown in popularity and fame since those days.
And what time of the year is it run?
There is something called the Grand Départ. Excuse my poor French pronunciation there. So you can do the Tour Divide in 3 main ways. You can either start at the same time as everybody else that's doing the race in Banff in Canada. I believe it's the 2nd week of June every year. Mm-hmm. So in that option, you race against all of the people who start at that time. And then the second option is to do what's called an individual time trial. So you can start whenever you want, basically, have a bit more flexibility. And with that option, you can also go from south to north rather than going from north to south.
Okay.
And then the final option, obviously, is just to do it at your own pace, take a much more leisurely approach, and just do a longer tour or do individual parts of it. Just to add to that, there is a kind of a window of opportunity for the Tour Divide, because you want to miss the snow in Canada and the north of the US, and also miss some monsoons in the south. So Typically, it's done between June and September each year.
Okay. So when one sends in their letter of intent to do this, do you have to then state what category you wish to go in, whether you want to be a solo going a time trial or the versa, or can you leave that until the last minute?
Yeah, that's right. You indicate what you want to do.
And what did you choose?
So we opted for the individual time trial. We wanted more flexibility. We also opted for the less popular south to north route. So we started off on the Mexican border and rode north through the US and into Canada. The reason we did that was we'd done a bit of research into the weather situation. We were quite keen to avoid the cold weather. There's certain members of the group can't handle the cold, so we thought that gave us the best chance of missing out on snow. And as it worked out, we were very lucky with the weather, so that proved to be a good choice.
Were there many others doing the same route, or were most of them going from north to south?
Just a few, just a handful going south to north. But one of the great things about it was that as we were traveling north, we were met by some of the people coming south, including the race leaders. So it was great to see some of these real hardcore, crazy people coming whizzing past us and having a quick chat with them from time to time.
How long did it take them to finish the complete distance?
Yeah, it's totally crazy. The guys that win this thing, the men and women, they finish in, I think the record is something like 14 days.
Wow.
And it really is a feat of endurance. These people survive on very little sleep. I think, they're doing upwards of 200 miles a day in some quite seriously challenging conditions. So that's at one end of the spectrum. I think the average time to complete is around about, somewhere in the early 20s in number of days, 21, 22 days. But I think anything under 30 days is quite a respectable time.
Now, I would have expected that by starting in Mexico, you guys gave yourselves a bit of a sense of false security before you hit the big mountains. Is that right? Did you have a bit of flat riding to do before you actually got to the real tougher parts?
Very, very little. It starts off flat, but you're very quickly into some hilly areas. And in fact, the highest point of the Tour Divide is something called Indiana Pass, at about 12,000 feet. And for us, that came very quickly. It came on about the 5th day, I think. So although we didn't realize it at the time, I think altitude probably played a part in how we were feeling early on.
And were you riding together as a group, or did you just go off separately each day and then catch up at the end of the day?
Yeah, we were loosely riding together as a group. We respected the rules of the race, so there was no drafting, so no kind of shielding behind somebody else and protecting yourself from the wind. And no helping each other out. But we generally stayed in the same place at night and set off together. And obviously during the day, people were riding at different speeds, so we would become disconnected, but then meet back up at a certain point in the day.
How was that sense of emotion when you were about to start this? Like when you arrived in Mexico and you were, the night before you took off, how were you feeling inside about the whole thing?
Yeah, super excited. We'd spent the best part of a year preparing for it, so excitement levels were off the scale. We decided to set off and ride through the night, so set off at about 1 a.m. in the morning from the start point to try and avoid the heat of New Mexico. Which sounded like a good idea, but obviously trying to sleep before that was very difficult with all the excitement. So I think we were pretty sleep deprived over the first few days. What
was a typical day of riding consisting of? Did you say to yourselves that you were going to just take it as you went and how you were feeling, or did you try and set yourself a gauge of X amount of miles each day?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been asked what it was like, and the way I normally answer that is you set off with a particular target for completing in a certain number of days. So in our case, we were determined to try and finish in 25 days. So you start off each day saying, okay, what on average do we need to achieve to accomplish that? And let's say it was 110 miles for that particular day. You'd set off and something unexpected would happen. There'd be a strong headwind, or somebody would have a mechanical problem, or whatever it was. So it's midnight, you're tired, you've only completed, let's say, 90 miles. You carry on for another hour or so, and then you're too tired to ride anymore. So you set up camp for the night. And then the next day, the average is obviously increased to 120 miles. So you're constantly playing catch up, feeling as though you're behind. But eventually you'll have a breakthrough day when you do more than the target, and you'll catch up a little bit, and then so it continues. And that's I think that's the feeling we had at the time.
Now, because you had to fly home effectively afterwards, did you have the pressure of an airline departure date hanging over you as well?
I didn't have the pressure of an airline departure date, but I did have the pressure of a very good friend's 50th birthday in Canada. So I had a hard stop of 27 days, come what may, to get to Whistler in Canada from Banff. So that was the time pressure that I personally had. Some of the other guys, did have the time pressure of flights out of the country. So it wasn't an open-ended experience.
Was the whole group made up of Englishmen, or did you have a different set of nationalities there? 2
Englishmen, 1 German, and 1 Australian. So you can imagine that was quite fun. But luckily we all knew each other very well, good friends. I've mentioned Tim. Shout out to Dave Watts and Simon Castley, who was the other member of the group.
It sounds like one of those jokes that starts with 2 Englishmen, a German, and an Aussie going to a bar.
Yeah, it was very much like that. And I think I could write a book one day on kind of group dynamics and cultural interaction.
How did it feel having to wait for the Aussie every day?
This is quite funny because we haven't chatted before, right, Mark? And you already know that. Well, let's just say the German was always first.
Yeah, of course. Of course he was.
The 2 English guys were somewhere in between, and the Australian liked his extra 10 minutes in his sleeping bag.
Was the German on a BMW bike?
No, he wasn't. But he was on a very technical piece of equipment.
Yeah, I'm sure he was.
Which failed on day number 6, I think it was, to our great delight.
So you had to carry all your spares and maintenance stuff as well. Did you do that as individuals, or did you do it as a group and just carry enough for the group?
No, we all carried our own gear, and that was one of the rules of the race. So we respected that. And one of the increasingly popular sports is known as bike packing. So it's carrying minimal gear on a bike that enables you to travel for multiple days. So we each carried a 1-man tent. We carried all our own bike tools and spares. We carried our own food and water and cold weather clothing, etc. So that was quite a weight to have on the bike, which made the mountains even more challenging.
Can you give the listeners any idea on kind of what that weight was? Do you know how much you were carrying?
I don't know exactly. I wasn't really obsessed by it, but I'm thinking somewhere in the region of 20 kilos, including the bike.
I bet the German knows.
I would imagine so.
Now, you're doing this in the summertime, so obviously during the daytime it was getting extremely hot. Was there any fears of dehydration and those sorts of things happening within the group?
Yeah, you had to be pretty careful about knowing where the next source of water was and the next source of food. So we were fairly well prepared for that, but there were a couple of occasions where it did get a little bit scary. I remember I think it was the 3rd day, running out of water, getting dehydrated and getting a bit concerned about that. But then out of nowhere, something good happens. There are some very kind people out there that leave water for the Tour Divide riders. So at that point, I actually stumbled across a big water container that somebody had left out along the route specifically for that purpose.
Yeah, I guess there needs to be a lot of considerations. Do they have any medical support at all along the route that you can stop off to, or do you have to go to normal? Well, if you actually do go into a medical facility, does that mean you've broken the rules and you're out of the race effectively, is it?
No, you can go to medical facilities, but obviously there's nothing specifically laid on for the ride. You would just have to find a town with its medical facility that's available to anybody else. It really is unsupported. You're totally out there at times in the middle of nowhere, and that was the attraction to us. I think one of the main attractions coming from a city like Hong Kong, where everything is so convenient. Everything you need is laid on a plate for you. So this was a big attraction of having to solve our own problems, and at times, being quite scary in having to do that.
And were there any challenges that got the group down? Like we were talking before we started the show today, and you told me you were trying to remember some of the low points. Were there times where somebody in the group, had a bit of a hard time and either didn't want to carry on, or you guys had to rally around anybody?
Yes, there were plenty of those moments every day. But I guess some of the low points included two of the guys getting mechanical problems with the bike and having to go off route for a certain amount of time and then rejoin us later after they'd had their bikes repaired. We spent one night up on a mountain where it got very cold, and that combined with how tired we all were, that led to some frayed nerves. So yes, there was quite a few moments during the race when, from my own personal viewpoint, I felt like I couldn't continue. I think there was 3 points I can think of where I nearly quit. Luckily managed to get over that.
What got you to that stage? Was it something about the terrain, lack of sleep, combination of everything? Was it just becoming all too overwhelming at that stage?
Well, what had happened to me was I'd had a minor accident a couple of weeks before setting off for this ride, and I cut my knee. I should have had it properly seen to, probably got some stitches, but I didn't get it professionally looked at. And then when I started off the ride, it quickly got infected. So I had to reach for the antibiotics, which solved the problem with the knee, but I think it created some additional problems stomach-wise. And then combined with all of the sugary rubbish that we were eating from US gas stations, it really had a bit of a disastrous effect on my stomach. So I ended up feeling terrible for a few days partway through the ride. And then, long story short, got disconnected from the rest of the group when I was feeling terrible, had to get up a very challenging mountain. And after that, really did feel like quitting. But the guys rallied around me. They were very supportive. They waited for half a day, which was very considerate of them. And we got it back together again.
And did the same thing happen to other members of the group? Yeah.
I think everyone had their own kind of personal low points during the ride.
That's really interesting. As you said earlier, it'd be quite interesting to write a book about that in terms of group dynamics and things.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously everybody has their own weak points in their body. So there was repetitive strain injuries. One of the guys had a problem with his Achilles. There were quite a few problems with our undercarriages, shall we say. Saddle sores were a big issue.
I imagine.
So a few personal demons had to be overcome at various points.
I'm interested to know, before you set out to do this, were there any things that you had kind of highlighted in your own mind that may be perhaps weaknesses that either didn't appear or they did manifest themselves more during the ride and you had to deal with that? Was there anything like that?
Personally, I'm someone who doesn't survive very well on little sleep, and as it turned out, we were probably averaging about 5 hours a night, maybe 5.5 hours a night for 27 days. If I'd known that before the ride, I would have had some serious concerns about that. But as it turned out, it It was challenging, but I managed to get through it. I was also expecting a lot more mechanical problems with the bike. I'm not the greatest technical expert when it comes to bike maintenance, but as it turned out, I was very lucky. I didn't have a single puncture, and nothing seriously went wrong with the bike.
There were things where you excelled in your own expectations on different things associated with doing this journey.
One of my perceived weaknesses is kind of organisation, and having everything properly organised, not losing stuff, having all of my navigation tools in order and everything ready to go. I thought I'd be losing things left, right and centre, and that would be an issue. But actually, when it came down to it, I didn't do a bad job. Can't remember being in a situation where I lost anything crucial or anything like that. So that surprised me a little bit. As soon as I got back to normal life, normal service was resumed, and that is still a weakness.
Thank you for your honesty. What about the other competitors? Was there a thing going on where you were, one day passing another group and getting past and that, or was it a case of not seeing anybody else during the whole ride?
We saw a lot of people coming the other way, and we would, in the first few days, we would always stop and chat to everyone. And as we became more accustomed to that, we'd start bypassing certain people because otherwise it would have just taken too long to stop for everyone. So yeah, we would see a handful of people every day coming the other way. Very few people going in the same direction as ourselves.
Okay. Now, for people listening to this who are thinking, okay, I'm going to get on to YouTube and check out this Tour Divide, and I might even give it a go, what kind of minimal preparation would you suggest someone undertakes to even take this on now that you've actually done it? Were you prepared as much as you could have been, do you think, or do you think you could have spent a bit longer doing other long, multiple day rides?
I think we were pretty well prepared. I wish I had bought my major pieces of equipment a little bit earlier. I only took delivery of the bike that I used about 6 weeks before the race, so I would advise getting all of that sorted well in advance, and be sure to have tested everything on similar rides, and have certainly done a few multi-day rides so that you can test all of your camping equipment and everything that you're going to use. Never use anything for the first time. But overall, I think we were pretty well prepared. There is a ton of information on the internet on this ride, and you can become quite obsessed with exactly what piece of equipment you need for what, and trying to minimize your weight. But you'll see lots of forums and helpful advice online. And as I mentioned, the Divide movie is also a good starting point. That gives you a very good idea of what it's like. I
imagine there's lots of serial participants who come back year after year.
There is, yes, particularly amongst those who are trying to win it. But even for mere mortals, I think there's been a lot of repeat riders, and it's certainly something I'd like to do again one day as well.
Was there a lot of international participants in there?
Yeah, huge amount. So I can't remember the number of nationalities, but it was a lot from all parts of the world.
And what about ages? What was the oldest person that you saw or knew of that was doing the race the year you did it?
I can't remember the exact age, but my guess is late 60s.
And what about at the other end? Is there an age limit that one has to be to enter the race?
I'm not aware of an age limit. No, we saw a father and son doing it. I'm guessing the son was in his mid-teens. And as I mentioned, some people are simply doing this as part of a cycling tour, so they're not part of the race. I may have been dreaming this due to lack of sleep, but I'm sure I remember seeing a couple on a tandem who were pulling along one of those kind of child carriages that you can attach to a bike, with a very young infant in it. So if you're only doing a section of this, it's really accessible to anyone.
So based on what you've just said, I had a picture in my mind previously that this was like a rugged mountain trail that was only wide enough for one bicycle, and it was covered in rocks and gravel all the way, and And now you're saying that a tandem with a kid trolley behind can navigate this trail, is that right?
Not certainly not all of it. So I would describe the route as about 90% good quality dirt roads or hard packed gravel, but there is certainly a small percent of technical type riding. Some of it is unrideable. So there were certainly some sections where we were pushing the bikes or carrying the bikes. And then there's a small percentage as well on tarmac. So you are on some roads from time to time, which comes as a bit of a welcome relief.
What about river crossings and that? Were there many of those?
Not too many, but there were a few. Yeah.
Okay.
You get your feet wet from time to time. I haven't done any mountain biking before, and so if the question is coming from the point of view of do you need to be a very technically accomplished mountain bike rider, the answer is no. You can certainly get by.
Yeah. Now, you said at the beginning of the show, or when you started talking about the Tour Divide, that you actually trained for about a year leading up to it. Would you say that was about the required time that one would need to put in constant efforts for a year to get to the level to be able to do this?
It all depends, doesn't it, on how fast you want to complete it and what your targets and objectives are. But if you want to complete the Tour Divide in less than 30 days, I'd suggest you probably need to be training for at least 6 months in advance. But obviously, if you're touring and you've got a long time period available to you, then there's not much training at all required. You can actually get fit as you go along. And
do it, yeah, right. We haven't talked yet about the scenery, and I imagine from that part of the United States and Canada, it must be absolutely spectacular. So were there many times during the day where you were stopping to take photos and just in awe of the fantastic nature that was around you, or were you just suffering too much to enjoy that part of it?
That's a good question. One of our mantras was smell the roses. You've got to stop and take time to smell the roses. So we would mention that to each other from time to time, just to remember to do that, because as you said, it is really spectacular, the scenery. I think the Americans and Canadians are blessed with such a variety of scenery, and that was really the highlight of the tour for me. Such a spectacular scenery from New Mexico to the forests of Montana and into Canada.
I keep saying to anybody I come across who will listen to me that I think the United States has some of the most amazing scenery in the world, and a lot of people don't appreciate that. A lot of people don't get that until you go and do something like what you've done with this. It's just an extraordinary contrast across the country that, it has everything that the rest of the world has in one country, really, when you go looking for it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's incredible. I really only visited the US before on business, so I've been to many of the big cities, but I'd never really been out in the wilderness, and it really just blew me away. Some of the scenery there, you've got a mountain range called the Grand Teton, which was unbelievable. You've got the Flathead Valley in British Columbia, the Gila Wilderness, I hope I pronounced that right, in New Mexico. Yeah, many, many highlights, and just incredible.
What was your favourite spot? Like, what was the place or the scene that you had in your mind that you'll most remember from that whole trip, besides the finish line?
I think maybe northern Montana was my highlight. I thought the scenery there was spectacular, but it's difficult to say. I thought New Mexico also had a rugged kind of beauty to it. It's like being on the set of Breaking Bad. It's incredible.
Funny you say that. I had to list down my favourite TV series today on something I was applying for, and I put Breaking Bad down. That comes up again tonight. There we go.
Yeah. Well, I've recently started watching it again, and it's bringing back all these memories from the Tour Divide. Yeah, it's a great show.
It is a fantastic show. I'm really fascinated to know when you decided to do this and you went home and you told your family, what was the response from them that you were going to do this?
Well, I'm exceptionally lucky because my wife is a cyclist as well, so she gets it and was very supportive family, because I was missing at weekends for for a good part of 6 months, and I have a lot to thank them for. And my wife also accompanied me on a lot of the training rides as well. So I was lucky. You'd need to ask the other guys, I think, what their experience was.
Okay, well, I might do that. I might have to get the German and the Aussie on the show. I think there might be some good stories to be heard from those ones. Yeah,
yeah, hear their side of the story.
Yeah.
I was also very lucky in that my family were there at the finish line to meet me, so that was very, very special moment.
So tell us about that. Tell us about the elation of finishing, and also having done a lot of endurance races in the course of my life, I get this deep, well, it's a depression, kind of down adrenaline afterwards, that it's all over and you've got to go home. Did you experience that?
Yeah, I did. Luckily, we had a holiday tagged on to the end of this in Whistler, so it was a kind of letting me down gently type of scenario. But I found I just slept for most of that. I was just drifting in and out of sleep for a week. It was absolutely exhausting, and it took quite a while for various parts of my body to recover, particularly the hands.
I bet it did. I bet it's inspired you to do other long rides, though, has it? I bet you've cycled the length of the UK, have you?
It's created a bit of a monster, it has to be said. You're right. I don't know how you guessed at that, Mark, but the following year, my wife and I cycled the length of the UK.
There you go.
Land's End to John O'Groats.
Yeah.
That took 7 days and was very good for us because we had been out of the UK for so long. It was a good way of seeing parts of the countries that we'd never seen before. In the year after that, 2018, I cycled from the southern tip of Japan right up to the northern tip of Hokkaido. So I think I've decided this is the sport for me. I really like the concept of bike packing as a way of seeing new places, and I'm sure there's a few more adventures to come, hopefully.
Fantastic. Now, I'm interested to know particularly about the UK one. Is that mainly on bike paths? Can you do bike paths the whole way, or do you have to be on the road somewhere?
The one that we did was all on roads, but I understand that just recently there's some guys who have participated in events like the Tour Divide and have tried to create something similar in the UK. So there's now a mainly off-road route that runs all the way up through England and up to the north of Scotland. And I think there are events like this popping up in all parts of the world. There is something similar across Europe called the Transcontinental, and several rides in America that are quite similar as well.
Did your wife do the Japan trip with you?
She didn't. No, she didn't. But a couple of the guys who did the Tour Divide with me did join me at various parts of the Japan ride. So it was good to hook up with them again on a multi-day ride.
I'm sort of starting to get visions now of the Hangover Part 3 movie here, where this group of guys head off to all parts of the world to participate in extreme cycling events. Am I on the money with this, or what?
You certainly are, yeah. We're already in deep debate about what the next adventure is going to be. There's talk of Peru, there's talk of Kyrgyzstan, and there's talk of doing this ride in the UK that I just described as well.
You do know there is one across Australia.
Yeah, I did hear something about that. And also, I think there's a great route across New Zealand as well.
Yes, there is.
That I had on my bucket list.
Well, I would strongly advise you to do the New Zealand one before Australia, of course.
Of course.
What I was going to ask you before I let you go was, can you give anybody who's listening your top 3 tips for preparation for doing the Tour Divide? Because I think it's, as you say, there's a lot of information online, but would you suggest that you kind of overanalyze the information online and it's just about getting out there and doing it? Or how would you approach it again if you were a newbie doing it for the first time?
I would advise certainly to do as much reading as you can. As I said, there's some great advice online. I think you do need to be very well prepared. It certainly makes it a lot easier if you know where the resupply points are, you know where you can sleep, you know where the bike repair shops are, etc. I'd also advise, if you're not competent at bicycle repairs, to get yourself on a kind of course, or know how to do the basics. Maybe get yourself on a first aid course. which we didn't need to call upon, but it was good to know the basics of that. And also, know and understand your own body, and know how to treat any kind of typical repetitive strain type injuries that you're susceptible to.
Good advice. Getting into the philosophical side of this, how has this passion you now have for this extreme bicycle riding, how's it altered you as a person, or has it altered you as a person?
That's a deep question, isn't it? I think certainly, there's obviously a tendency to lapse back into how you were before, immediately after the race. But I think certainly during the Tour Divide experience, it taught me how to kind of live in the moment and be very grateful for small things. When you're out there and you're spending 6 days on the trot, camping rough, and you eventually chance upon a motel for the night, that hot shower feels pretty good. So I think it certainly teaches you to be grateful for the small luxuries in life.
Excellent. Is it a situation? Has it gone that deep with you that you actually still get in the shower at home now and have visions back to moments when you're out on that trail?
I think I've kind of gone past that point, but it's a good reminder to maybe once in a while get back out there again and rediscover it. That's a very good point.
That's interesting to know. Well, listen, I'm going to give my own podcast show a bit of a plug with you before you go today, and the reason I'm going to say that is because I've had 2 guests on so far who have done their own versions of extreme cycling, and one of them is still on the road today. His name's Ryosuke Tomataki. He's a young Japanese guy, and he's been cycling around the world, and he's currently up to about 17,000 kilometers, just gone through the Sahara Desert, and he's doing that solo. And he did a fascinating podcast episode with me, so you can check that out online to get a bit more inspiration from some others. And we also had Angie Tan originally from Singapore, Malaysian from Singapore, and she rode across America in the race across America a couple of years ago. So she also did an interview with me on the show. So if you are looking for some inspiration from others, then you can find them right here on our podcast show, Phil, so you can have a listen to those.
Oh, thanks. I'll definitely check those out.
Yeah, really interesting stories, and obviously quite from different perspectives as well. And Angie made a fantastic documentary out of her trip, and it's on YouTube and some other platforms as well. So have a listen to that. But listen, it's been fantastic having you on the show today. I really appreciate you coming and sharing your whole journey of the Tour Divide. I'm sure lots of people have been inspired, and I probably realise that some have even gone onto the website to look at signing up for next year, seeing it's already gone past this year. So thanks very much for doing that, Phil. And if you would like to come back after one of your next adventures, just give me a holler and we'll have you back on the show again. Maybe you could bring the German and the Aussie with you next time.
Yeah, that'd be fun. No, it's my pleasure, Mark. Nice speaking with you.
Yeah, you too. And have a great weekend up there in the UK, and we'll speak again soon.
Great, thanks.
So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Phil Shirley from the UK, riding a bicycle over 4,400 kilometres along the Tour Divide in the United States and Canada. Go and check it out online. I'm sure it's an amazing event. I'd like to hear from anybody else that's done it, or maybe is considering doing it as a result of listening to this podcast episode. Okay, so if you're looking for other podcast episodes in our series, you can head on over to the Global Travel Channel website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. There you'll find all of our episodes. You can also download them if you wish to from Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and a host of other sites that are all listed on our website. And don't forget, we're on Patreon now. So if you want to become a Patreon member to support our podcast channel in growing and becoming sustainable, then all your contributions are greatly appreciated. Okay, that's it for this episode. So the last thing for me to say is my name is Mark Philpott, and I wish you all bon voyage.